Hello, welcome back once again to the other side of the cell. This is Michael Jackson coming at you again. Um, on this video, we're going to talk about whenever inmates have mental breakdowns in prison. Basically, we're going to title this as Losing It. You know, whenever inmates come into prison or jails, usually the first 72 hours or 48 hours, depending on where you're at, they put people in close observation because whenever you make the adjustment from civilian life to being locked up, it's a very depressing, very hard thing to navigate. So, whenever this happens, I've seen a lot of inmates lose it. And in this particular case, uh, this is like a progression of a guy that did that. So, we're going to call this guy Little Jimmy because he was a little uh, in stature young man who came. Well, he wasn't young. He's probably in his mid 30s, probably pushing close to 40. But he came into our institution and he was lost from the beginning, and he couldn't physically fight, and he didn't really fit in with anybody. So basically, he was an outcast. He wasn't belong to any set, or he wouldn't belong to any gang or anything like that. He was pretty much a loner, and he was in on a grand larceny charge and domestic battery. So he, had a reputation that he beat women. So, other inmates didn't like him for that. Uh, he wasn't a part of any gang or anything. So he was by himself. So basically, during the process of his incarceration, you noticed a lot of over the top behaviors. Like he didn't have real good communication skills, so he yelled instead of talked to people. Uh, he was very annoying. He got beat up a lot, smacked around. So he struggled with that whole process of being incarcerated. And guys used to make fun of him, used to tell him to do all kinds of weird things, and he would do that, such as he would walk up to inmates and grab them by their twist their nipples and do horseplay a lot, and people just used to use him as a punching bag. Well, in this particular incident, he uh, an inmate he got a janitor's job on the pod, so he was in charge of sweeping and mopping the floors. That's basically in the day room area. That was his job. But since the inmates hated him and they always were sending him on dummy missions, which like they might send him on a dummy mission, they go up to that officer and call him a punk or something, a pussy, and get him and tell him you'll kick his ass. He'd do that. He gets sprayed, get locked up, whatever. Do his 30 days in the hole, do his whole shot, get out, put him back on the dorm. He'd go back to get a dorm job, repeat the cycle. Well, anyway, nobody wanted to live with this guy. Nobody wanted to be around him because he's such a clown. And he was, he had some mental problems. But on this day, he completely lost it and went completely out of his mind. So a couple inmates talked him into, they said, "You always clean this dorm. I want you to clean this dorm and mop the floor. But you use your ass this time mopping the floor." And through the investigation process, interviewing other inmates, is how we found out this whole process. But anyway, one day, the dorm he was on one of the upper levels, so you had to come down a couple flights of steps to get to the hallway door to come out. Anyway, there was officers in the hallway, supervising the hallway traffic, and he came down to the door one day. No, another inmate came down to the door one day and said, "Hey, you need to get up on that dorm and get little Jimmy off that dorm before they kill him." And they're like, "What are you talking about?" And Like you just go up there, you got to watch. This guy is mopping the floor with his ass, and everybody's like, "What do you mean?" And he said, go up there and find out. I'm not telling you nothing. Just go up there." So they get a hold of me on the radio. Um, I I come out of my office and head up to the dorm to see what's going on. A couple officers trail me. Um, I walk up on the dorm, and little Jimmy is up on the dorm, and he's naked, and he had shoved a broom handle up his rectum, up his ass, and he was sweeping the day room floor with his butt. So if you can imagine walking up on the dorm, seeing a guy naked, and seeing a broom coming out of his anus, that's the picture. And you have the inmates up there just cheering him on, talking smack to him, and saying, "You missed the spot." And he'd go over and shake his behind, and he he would do that. And then when we got up there, we we had to basically rush the guy, grab him, secure him on both sides, both of his arms, secure his arms, and we were in the dilemma: do we try to pull this thing out of him, or do we get him to medical? Because if we pulled it out of him and splintered, or some type of something bad happened, we're going to end up hurting this guy more than he's hurt himself already. And when I tell you he had the broom up his rectum, I'm telling you he had it at least a good a foot or so up inside of him. So the decision was made at that time. We were not going to try to pull that thing out because we didn't want a bad situation getting worse. So at that point, we just basically secure him, uh, handcuff him behind his back, and throw a sheet around him, tied around his waist, and leave the broom in him, and we escort him up to medical. Well, at that time, he had we had a doctor. He was from Russia, and he dealt with inmates differently because in Russian prisons, inmates they have no rights at all. So he was used to dealing with people that have no rights, and basically, get him up there, get him laid down on the examining table, and basically the doctor just adds some type of lubricant, baby oil type stuff, and pours it on his backside, and just grabs it and rips it out of him. And fortunately for little Jimmy, it was not. It was a smooth handle, so it didn't have any splinters, and it came out. He did do some damage internally to his bowels and rectum and all that kind of stuff. And I had to take him out to medical. And yeah, that was an episode of somebody that just lost it. And sometimes inmates just lose it like that. They get in prison, they get confined, and the world shuts down on them. They really don't know what to do with themselves, and they let other inmates talk them into all kinds of craziness. And little Jimmy, he did that. They got him back to the facility. We ended up keeping him, though. We did keep him. He didn't get shipped off to psych ward or anything else. They got him on some medication. Basically, they got him on, Thorazine or whatever they put him on, and basically he slept most of the time after that, and he turned into, a drooling, just medicated person that just walked around and slept most of the time and was not even a functioning human being. But that's the way they decided to manage him at that time. So he ended up, discharging his sentence and going back into society. And the thing about, incarcerated people and people in prison and stuff, people forget about them, but, the majority of people that come to prison eventually get out. So if you don't understand that, people in prison are getting out one day. You better figure that out, because society as a whole has got to figure out what to do with these people and not just warehouse them. And that's what happens to people when they get incarcerated. Sometimes they just lose it. And that was the case of little Jimmy losing it. And I've never seen anybody clean a floor, or mop the floor with by putting it up inside them. But this guy did it, and it was not a made up story. It was actual fact, and the only way you can believe it is by going up there, watching it, and seeing it happen. And it happened, and he did it more than once. That was just the time that the inmates got fed up with it, and somebody sent word that somebody need to go up and deal with it, because they beat the guy and smacked him around to the point where after a while they get tired of that, and they have to do something to eliminate him from the situation without somebody killing him or hurting him really bad. So that's what they did at that time. So, you know, the thing about incarceration is sometimes people lose it, and that's just an example. One example I've seen firsthand of somebody losing it in a way that's just peculiar. It's just madness. Sometimes it really is. It's just madness. The things that you see in prison. If you know anybody been in prison, they tell you stories about prison, and a lot of times people say, "Oh God, he's just making shit up." No, he's really not, because it's just a different universe. It's a different world than it is out in the street. So make sure you like, subscribe, and comment to these videos. Keep the suggestions flowing, and I'll keep telling you the stories that I have first-hand experience with, give you my insight, and hopefully some of these stories will reach out and make it to the people that need to hear it, make it to some of these troubled youth that need to hear it. And maybe this will keep somebody from coming to prison or acting out. And if you're a correctional staff or something like that, the stories go on for days, and I could tell you stories and stories and stories. And it's not a job for everybody, and going to prison is not for everybody. So if you go to prison, you better understand that it's a different world. Until next time, I'll see you on the other side.